So I watched Squid Game Season 2 like a month ago. Well, judging by how long it takes me to put out a video, it was probably more like half a year. Either way, I watched it, and it was indeed a show that exists. Well, to be specific, it was pretty bad. Utter trash and a waste of space in my personal time. Just like how grass is green and the sky is blue, this is common knowledge. But hypothetically speaking, let's just say I had incredibly bad taste and I liked this season enough to defend it. Well, this is what it would look like. Now, for the first common criticism, we have Gi-hun should have known that player 1 was the front man. I'm gonna be honest, this is a very weird criticism, and I never got why people had this criticism in the first place, but I'll try and debunk it anyway. Firstly, for Gi-hun to assume that player 1 is a mole just because he has the same number as Il-nam is a huge stretch, considering that there is no evidence for Gi-hun to go off of. The only thing I can think of is that his friend almost said that player 1 was untrustworthy, but he backed down from that claim anyway. Secondly, Gi-hun believes trusting people is necessary for surviving in Squid Game. Thirdly, believing in the goodwill of people is a huge part of Gi-hun's character, so naturally he wouldn't just assume that player 1 is a mole. Now for the next criticism. The detective storyline was complete filler. Although I have my own problems with the detective storyline, which I'll mention towards the end of this section, I don't entirely agree with this criticism. For example, a lot of the decisions that Gi-hun makes is out of desperation because the detective and his team aren't able to help. The reason that Gi-hun came to the desperate decision to revolt against the guards is because the detective and his team couldn't get to the Squid Game fast enough. Which also ties into the lingering question of who the mole is that removed the tooth tracker. I get that pretty much all of the examples I listed are of the detective group being inactive, but I still think it's important to have, since most of the decisions that Gi-hun makes would not make sense if the detective group was easily able to find him. And no, I don't think getting rid of the detective storyline altogether would benefit the show, since it would be out of character for Gi-hun not to gather some kind of extra firepower to stand against Squid Game. The Squid Game. Also, I think this storyline does a great job at expanding on the detective's character. The biggest example of this is the fact that he won't tell anyone that the frontman is his brother. I think this can be interpreted in two ways. One, he doesn't want his brother to get killed. Two, he can't fully admit to himself and to others that his brother is the frontman. Also, these two things that I just said could be both a part of his character instead of just an either or on why he won't tell anyone that his brother is the frontman. I just thought of that. I don't know why I was stating it as if it was either or, but whatever. Now for my own criticisms. I don't think the detective storyline adds enough to the overall story. Although I like that this results in Gi-hun making desperate decisions, I still think it is a bit ridiculous that the crew doesn't even reach the Squid Game by the end of Season 2. Which brings me to my next criticism. The ending should have been more conclusive. This criticism I actually completely agree with. Most of what I have to criticize on this end is going to be about the detective storyline, so first I'm going to start off with the Gi-hun plotline, or the main plotline basically. I think ending the season off with the revolt and Gi-hun's best friend dying is a nice note, but it doesn't take away from the fact that pretty much all of the character arcs feel and are unfinished, and the fact that we have to wait a whole nother season to come out just to see how the revolt will affect each character kind of adds to the fact that this season doesn't really feel very conclusive. Now, time to get to the detective storyline. Like I said before, I would have liked for the detective to make some kind of big leap apart from just finding the right island. I also think ending it off on revealing who the mole is feels pretty abrupt, considering that we don't see how this will affect the crew until season 3. And all this really accomplishes is setting back their progression in the plot a few notches. Also, one big reason why I feel like the season split affects the detective storyline the most is because a lot of the tension built up around the detective storyline is if they're going to find the Squid Game or if they're not. If they're going to be able to stop it in time before we have a lot of casualties. And I think splitting the seasons up to where we don't even really see like the payoff of the detectives' findings or where they're going to go kind of takes a lot away from this storyline, and it makes it feel more unimportant than it has to. My only defense against this criticism is that you only have to wait like 6 months for the new season. I mean, it's still pretty bad, but at least it's like, not another year. Also, another criticism to add on that I just remembered, or not, honestly, not even criticism, but it's just something that I would have personally liked. I would have liked to wait for just like all of the content from season 2 and season 3 just to all come out on a later date than splitting it up 6 months apart. I don't know, it does leave like a sorta bad taste in my mouth where I'm like, okay, now I have to wait another 6 months, which just kind of sucks. Now that I've laid out all of my complaints, here are some things that I would like to see from season 3. I would like 1 or 2 episodes, probably like 2 episodes, I would say, just focusing on the detective storyline, fleshing out the characters more, and trying to create a bigger impact on the story overall. If I was to say like specific characters, I would honestly just say the detectives specifically, and maybe the boat captain who's the mole. Take 2 episodes to focus just on the detective storyline, make some kind of big leap in the overall storyline that wasn't really there in season 2, and then go back to the main story and see how the revolt affected each character. That would be what I would do if I could make the decision on like how to pace the 3rd season, I guess. Now that I've laid out all of the criticisms that I agree and disagree with, it is time to give this video a sort of finale that Squid Game Season 2 didn't have. I will now give my score. The score is 3 out of 10. Goodbye, everyone.
Up out at 1 in the morning, you really wanna know this kind of life never boring.